One. That's all it takes. We thought it took so many more. To make power listen. To make someone take notice. To make a difference. We thought one could only watch. But one is all it takes. To show the way. To bring light where darkness prevailed. To change the way. One is all it takes.
Introducing myself. I'm Menaka Doshi. I haven't been to jail as yet. I do want to list all the journalists in India that have been to jail in recent years, but we just don't have the time for that this evening. It's only a 2-hour show, so I'll just mention one name, Prabir Purkayast, editor, NewsClick. And he's at the center of our debate tonight, NewsClick and After, New Challenges for News Media. Moderating that conversation is Naresh Fernandes, editor of Scroll.in. Naresh, can we have you up? And joining him on the panel are distinguished personalities, Aspi Chinoy, eminent lawyer and senior counsel, Sanjay Pandey, former Mumbai police commissioner, Jitendra Dixit, senior journalist and author, and Kalpana Sharma, senior columnist. Naresh, you have 30 minutes.
Good evening and welcome to this event that honors some of the best journalism in India. So it reminds us that no matter how difficult the circumstances seem to be, some people are still doing their job of holding the line and speaking truth to power. A few months ago, at the height of the summer, two men in suits walked into the Scroll office in Delhi. A tiny ripple of anxiety spread through the room. Some of my colleagues probably kicked themselves for failing to have downloaded that app we'd heard about that automatically wipes out all the data on your phone at the click of a button. Others probably recalled the stories we've heard from other colleagues on the raids on independent news organizations around the country, and how those raids had continued for several days. The men in the suits looked around the room and then got to work. They started trying to sell everybody new bank accounts. It was just one indication of the nervousness that has gripped many independent news organizations. A nervousness that has only grown since October the 3rd, when the police visited dozens of people associated with NewsClick early that morning. As many of you know, the publication has been accused of receiving illegal funds from China in an attempt to disrupt India's sovereignty. The founder of NewsClick, Prabir Purkayasta, and the organization's human resource head, Amit Chakravarti, have been arrested under UAPA, the draconian terror law. And yesterday, a court in Delhi extended their custody by another 21 days. When last I checked, the police had searched the homes of 90 people, graphic designers, sub-editors, freelance contributors, and seized 250 phones, computers, and tablets from them. This was an exercise designed to serve a warning to all journalists, no matter how recently they joined the profession, that speaking truth to power comes at a heavy price. Of course, we've seen some of these methods being used before. In 2016, for instance, when Kanhaiya Kumar and other JNU students were arrested, their phones and computers were seized. In Kashmir, journalists have been arrested under anti-terror charges. Um, but the sheer scale of the raids on NewsClick would seem to indicate that a new line has been crossed. To tease out the repercussions of this new development, we have this stellar panel. And I'm going to start with Jitendra Dixit. Jitendra, what was different about the NewsClick raid, and how has it affected your work? And do you think this is going to lead to more self-censorship?
Thank you, Naresh. First of all, my observation is that in India, words media freedom have become oxymoronic. And if you talk about what is different in NewsClick matter, so I'll say कि सरकार फ्री मीडिया को दबाने के लिए हर तरह के पैतरे आजमाती है, साम दाम दंड भेद सारा कुछ इस्तेमाल करती है। लेकिन थैंकफुली कुछ लोग ऐसे अभी भी हैं और ऐसे लोग यहाँ पर मौजूद हैं जो अभी भी पत्रकारिता का सच का दिया जलाए हुए हैं, रोशनी बरकरार रखी है जिन्होंने। अब ऐसे लोगों को लेबल किया जाता है, 3 तरह से लेबल किया जाता है। पहला ये कि आप लेफ्टिस्ट हैं, दूसरा ये कि आप चाटुकार हैं, आप साइकोफेंट हैं, और साइकोफेंट किसके? ऑपोजिशन पार्टी के, जो सबसे बड़ी पार्टी है। और तीसरा जो सबसे खतरनाक है वो है कि आप एंटी नेशनल हैं। और ये शब्द हम बार बार सुन रहे हैं जर्नलिस्ट के लिए। जो न्यूज़क्लिक का मामला है वो भी यही है। अब हम सभी जानते हैं कि बीते 4-5 सालों में न्यूज़क्लिक किस तरह का जर्नलिज्म कर रहा था। सत्ता से सवाल पूछ रहा था, ऐसी स्टोरीज कर रहा था जो कि सेंट्रल में रूलिंग पार्टी को अनकंफर्टेबल कर रही थी। और फिर उनके खिलाफ 2 साल पहले मामला शुरू हुआ जिसमें आर्थिक गड़बड़ी के आरोप लगाए गए। उसमें अब तक क्या निकला नहीं निकला अब तक सामने नहीं आया है। एंड देन फिर न्यूयॉर्क टाइम्स में एक आर्टिकल छपता है कि चाइना से फंडिंग हुई है उसकी, एंड देन दीज गाइज आर रेडेड। ठीक है, इसमें अजीब बात यह है कि आपने अरेस्ट किया प्रबीर पुरकायस्थ को, आपने उनके HR मैनेजर को भी अरेस्ट कर लिया, अमित चक्रवर्ती को, लेकिन उसके साथ साथ आपने 90 ऐसे जर्नलिस्ट को हैरेस किया जिनका कि वैसे देखा जाए तो कोई सीधे तौर पर लेना ही नहीं है फंडिंग से। वो तो कंटेंट दे रहे थे, वो एक फ्रीलांसर के तौर पर या फिर कैजुअल कंट्रीब्यूटर के तौर पर जुड़े हुए थे। कई सारे जो फॉर्मर एम्प्लॉयज थे आपने उनको हैरेस किया, आप उनके घर पर पहुंचे, उनके घर पर आपने छापे मारे, आपने उनके इलेक्ट्रॉनिक डिवाइसेस सीज किए, आपने लैपटॉप्स उनके छीन लिए, आपने लैपटॉप्स जब्त किए, आपने मोबाइल फोन्स उनके टैब्स जब्त किए। और मुझे लगता है कि आज की तारीख में इंडिपेंडेंट पत्रकार के लिए ये एक बहुत बड़ी समस्या है कि अगर उनके हाथ से ये सारे डिवाइसेस छिन जाते हैं, एक तो उनके काम करने में दिक्कत आएगी, और दूसरा ये कि अगर मैं एक पत्रकार हूं तो मेरे मोबाइल फोन में मेरे कॉन्टैक्ट्स हैं, ऐसे सोर्सेस हैं जो मैं सिर्फ मुझे ही पता रहने चाहिए, जो लोगों को नहीं पता हो। और कई बार ऐसे भी उसमें सोर्सेस हो सकते हैं जो हम चाहेंगे कि वो सरकार को ना पता चले। कई बार किसी सरकारी एजेंसी में ही कोई विसल ब्लोअर है, वो हमारा सोर्स है, तो हम उसकी जानकारी क्यों दें। लेकिन ऐसे में जब आपका मोबाइल फोन ही उठा लिया जाता है तो आप रिस्क में आ जाते हैं। तो ये बड़ी विचित्र बात लगी, लेकिन बात विचित्र जरूर है, अलग जरूर है, लेकिन पता है कि क्यों हुआ ऐसा। सीधे सीधे संदेश देने के लिए हुआ कि समझ जाओ, अगर आप लोग इस तरह से करेंगे, आप लोग सत्ता से सवाल पूछेंगे, आप लोग ऐसी स्टोरीज करेंगे जो कि सरकार को एम्बैरेस कर सकती है, सरकार के पास जिसके जवाब नहीं हो सकते हैं, आप सरकार की लापरवाही या भ्रष्टाचार के मामले खोलेंगे तो आपके साथ ऐसा हो सकता है। ये सभी के लिए संदेश था। और फिर ये एक कोई अकेला मामला नहीं है, जैसे आपने अभी बताया कि इसके पहले भी बहुत सारे ऐसे मामले हो चुके हैं। अब ऐसे में बिल्कुल जाहिर तौर पर जो इंडिपेंडेंट जर्नलिस्ट हैं वो जाहिर तौर पर उनको इंटिमिडेट करने की कोशिश हुई है, वो डरे हुए भी हैं और उन्हें समझ नहीं आ रहा है कि आगे इस तरह का काम कैसे करें। ये तो एक न्यूज़ क्लिप का मामला है, आप बाकी स्टेट्स में जाइए, स्टेट्स में देखिए, वहां पर भी कई तरीके से स्टेट गवर्नमेंट्स जो अलग अलग पार्टियों की हैं उनकी ओर से भी ऐसा ही हो रहा है। कई बार किसी एक जगह पर किसी जर्नलिस्ट ने कुछ कंटेंट दिया, कोई स्टोरी की, तो दूसरे स्टेट में जाके हजारों किलोमीटर दूर जाके उसके खिलाफ FIR दर्ज हो रही है। आप महाराष्ट्र में कोई स्टोरी दे रहे हैं, आपके खिलाफ गुजरात में, आसाम में मामला दर्ज हो रहा है। आप क्या करेंगे? आप वहां पर जाइए, कोर्ट के चक्कर लगाइए, वहां पे वकील कीजिए। अगर आप किसी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन से जुड़े हुए हैं तो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ठीक है, आपके लिए वकील मुहैया कराएगा, आपके वकील की फीस वो भरेगा। लेकिन अगर आप इंडिपेंडेंट जर्नलिस्ट हैं, इफ यू आर ऑन योर ओन, तो फिर क्या होगा? तो मुझे लगता है कि यही एक बात है जो विचित्र है। और अब हमें तमाम इंडिपेंडेंट जर्नलिस्ट को ये सोचना होगा कि इस तरह से अगर सत्ताधारी पार्टियां आपकी घेरेबंदी करती हैं तो उसके बावजूद भी आप कैसे पत्रकारिता को जिंदा रख पाएंगे?
Thank you. Kalpana, Sharma, in discussions, people often compare this period to the emergency. This, of course, the tragic irony of the fact that Probir was also arrested during emergency as being arrested now. You're among the few people who can address this authoritatively, since you were the editor of Himmat magazine at that time. What are the similarities and differences between the way the state operates, has operated in each period?
Yeah, so it's interesting how this question keeps coming up, you know. Is this an undeclared emergency, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, all the time we've had this repeated. But from my perspective, of course, there are similarities, but there are also very big differences. And let me just say that the way I would describe June 26, 1975, it was the guillotine method of dealing with the press. That is what Indira Gandhi did. Whereas post-2014, what we are seeing is a slow bleed. So we have to decide at the end what happens. And I think, as you said, we can see what the picture is. Now, again, the difference is Indira Gandhi used what was available in the law when she imposed the emergency. So press censorship was imposed within the provisions available to her. And first, you know, those of us in Himmat, for instance, and other papers, we were told that there would be self-censorship, whereby we were supposed to adhere to some guidelines that the government was going to issue. And then later, this became selective pre-censorship. Like newspapers, for instance, were the censor representative would sit in the newsroom and actually look at some copy. Some other newspapers had to send copy to the chief censor, who ironically actually happened to be the former resident editor of the Indian Express here in Mumbai. And these guidelines, so to speak, just kept changing. You know, they were like a moving target. You never knew from one day to the next what new guideline would come in. It could be at the whim of a minister, Sanjay Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, anyone. And it would be communicated often verbally, not even a written guideline. But you would get inclination or some suggestion that such and such thing will not be accepted. So that is the way censorship worked. And then, in addition, as now, in fact, the government had other ways to intimidate, you know. This was the direct way, the censorship. But there was the indirect way, which is what we are seeing now, where especially with the bigger papers, newspapers, many of whom started off with blank edits and trying to show some kind of resistance, but frankly, all of them fell in line. All the big newspapers fell in line, you know. And they did so because the thing with big media is they're vulnerable because of what they own, and governments can always affect how they report. And this has happened even pre-emergency, as anybody who knows the history of the Indian media knows, that all governments have used all kinds of other tactics to bring the press in line, but not in the way it was done in the emergency. And apart from that, there was denial of advertising. That was another thing that is happening now, which very much happened during the emergency. There was a kind of a blacklist of newspapers and periodicals where public sector companies and, of course, the governments could not release ads to those companies. Now, again, if you're big, maybe you can absorb the shocks. But when you're small or a smaller journal, even the denial of a few ads that you get regularly can make all the difference between whether you'll survive or not. And then, of course, there was the risk of arrest, which was always there. Some well-known editors like Kuldeep Nair and others had been arrested. So as you were saying, the message was there. Even if hundreds of journalists were not picked up, the message was there that you could be arrested. But again, then as now, there were the smaller, more independent newspapers and publications that actually initially managed to escape scrutiny, and Himmat was one of those. And, you know, I think we deluded ourselves a little bit and thought that we are small, you know, we have a small readership. Why should these powerful people sitting in Delhi bother about us, you know? They should be concerned about the Indian Express and Statesman and the other big newspapers. But obviously that was an illusion, because very soon it was very clear that from wherever there was any kind of criticism, any effort to try and show what was really going on in the country, which other newspapers were simply not reporting, the authorities would be on your back immediately. And Himmat, for instance, for carrying an innocuous item about a demonstration at Rajghat on the 2nd of October, which was attended by Acharya Kripalani and many others who were detained. For carrying a report on that, we were slapped with pre-censorship. After that, we had to submit every single page to the censor. Not only that, the printer who had been printing Himmat for many, many years was basically told that if you continue, then your printing press can be seized. Again, it was not in writing, but he got the message. So he begged us to move elsewhere. We found another printer, a small printer, but he said, I cannot take a chance. You'll have to show me every single page that I typeset has been passed by the censor. That's, I'm telling you, my experience, but there were many other smaller papers. But these smaller publications, by virtue of the fact that they were small, actually still managed to get something through. By innuendo, through humor, through other kind of writing, but they managed to convey, and because people were looking out for that, they actually got it, But there was a price to pay, of course. As I said, we couldn't escape the scrutiny completely. But the point I'm making now is, especially in relation to NewsClick, we may, the other thing I want to say about the small publications is many of us depended on what are called goodwill advertising, because you didn't have big circulation. So you depended on people who supported what you stood for. Now, those people were pressurized also not to give ads. And again, for a small publication, we had maximum, if we had a 32-page issue in a week, we thought that was a great thing. But, if 3 or 4 ads went off, then it would mean literally you would be reduced to 18 pages, maybe 16 pages. That's the kind of drastic difference it would make in our ability to print. And this was a story for many. In fact, some, like Opinion, which was 8-page publication that was brought out by Gorwala, A.D. Gorwala from here, who was very trenchant critic of Indira Gandhi and the government, that he closed down. Rather than give in to censorship, he did not have any ads. So we are seeing something similar now today, because I will not talk about mainstream media, because I think it's fairly obvious to all of us, many of us who are journalists, that some of them are trying to play some kind of balancing game, but basically you can see that there's a heavy amount of self-censorship on every page, depending on, they think they can get away if they say, hand over the op-ed page and give vast spaces to ministers and others from the government to write, or from think tanks that are sympathetic to the government. The Prime Minister, irrespective of what he inaugurates, it may be a small, side bridge somewhere, will always be front-page news. How is it front-page news? But it will be now, because that is the kind of balancing game that's being played. The independent spaces like we had during the emergency are now represented by the independent digital platforms. And I think the NewsClick message above all is that you may be small, but as far as we are concerned, we will not tolerate even that much. And in that sense, I think it's similar to what we experienced during the emergency, that your size doesn't matter, your reach doesn't matter. The fact that you're there, that you're questioning, that's what matters. And of course, the irony today is that, of course, there is no direct censorship. So the government can very well claim that, we still believe in freedom of the press, we are still a democracy, we are not like Indira Gandhi did during the emergency, there's no censorship. But to use these other tools like the ED and the tax to intimidate and virtually close down the smaller spaces which are critical is no less than censorship. And it is completely inimical to any idea of a free press and a democracy. And finally, I want to say, I think many of us did not maybe wake up enough on the 5th of August, 2019, when Article 370 was read down in Kashmir. Because in my view, what happened in Kashmir with the press was like the petri dish of what we are seeing today. Because first it was the bigger newspapers that were deprived of advertising and basically bullied into falling in line, which they have done. And you see even the Rising Kashmir, any of those papers are saying the same thing now. None of them will write anything critical. And then the smaller digital spaces like Kashmir Wala and others were basically intimidated to the point Fahad Shah was arrested. He's just been released. But Kashmir Wala has been brought down. It's not there. So if you want to get any news from Kashmir now, it's extremely difficult. The message to all of us here in the rest of the country should have been very clear on that day and in the days that followed, that this is exactly what is going to follow. And we are only now waking up to it because of what has happened to NewsClick. So I think, to me, the lesson of these last 40 years and more since the emergency is that you can never take the freedom of the press for granted, that big media will always keel over, and that it is really important in any situation, whether it's here or in other countries that also claim their democracies, that we do sustain and find ways of sustaining the small and independent spaces, because that is the only record we'll have now of what is actually going on in the country, because vast areas of this country are not being reported upon. Things are happening in this country that are not being documented. And for the future, if you want to know what happened in these last 10 years, the only spaces we can look for is in the small independent journals and publications.
Thanks so much, Kalpana. Actually, one of the challenges, I mean, many of us see our role as keeping a record, but as we know from the example in Kashmir, all those online archives have disappeared. And so even the chronicle of the years leading up to this don't exist anymore. Sanjay Pandey, as a former policeman, what do you think has changed in the official attitude to journalists and journalism? And why has this war been launched on journalism?
Well, you asked that what has changed in the attitude of the police towards the journalist. If I'm going to go by what the written rules are, which were made in British time, but there is a conduct rule, which is like civil services conduct rules, which prohibit a government servant from not only talking to the press, but to another government servant also. I was trying to figure this out. So there's a very clear embargo on the government servants not to share with the journalists. So that's, if that builds an attitude, I cannot say. But if you mean to say that if they are inimical to the journalist, I think then that would be, if you see it in the garb of the fact that they're not supposed to talk, they're not supposed to disclose, sometimes they do it as it was just being mentioned that there are some people who are whistleblowers who are doing it, but they're doing it at their own peril. I mean, that's how the system is. So, and then you talk about, then you said, why are they after journalism as such? No, journalism is a bigger thing. The fact that I'm not supposed to talk to any journalist actually covers the bigger aspect as well. But see, the dilemma of a policeman today, I've been here and many people would say that earlier he has to talk and later on because the commissioner I didn't talk and as a DG I didn't talk. The reason is it has become very amorphous today. I mean, you were saying small media and the bigger media. If you take my thoughts, I think the bigger or the small doesn't matter, but some kind of Aspi is here, he'll talk about this, some kind of statutory recognition for who all are the real, I mean, you can have anybody today come up and talk to you and say and suppose the government servant doesn't really respond to him, then you will say, look, he is inimical. Now, how does the government servant have an idea who is who and from where does he come from? So the question I'm throwing back to the journalist community here and to probably the bodies that are there for the journalists, that you need to have a very clear idea about when it's going towards digital media, when it's going to the WhatsApp medias, and I see a YouTube channel every day coming up. How does the government, I mean, today we are still under those conduct rules, so we apply the same to everybody, but still we are confused. I mean, I'm not a common servant anymore, but there's a confusion all the same. How to, and with whom, what? I mean, that's the problem. I mean, that's something that, and I must underline the fact that there is nothing like the government servants being inimical. and not being against the journalist. There's nothing like a bias to the, no, I don't think so.
Thanks so much. Aspi, Chinoy, with raids such as the one on NewsClick and the seizure of devices, for instance, and the use of terror laws, is the government misusing the law, or are they creatively interpreting existing laws? And what do laws in other democracies say, especially about the seizure of devices?
It might raise a more fundamental question, which I'd like to tell you, that the law is not an objective animal, and it's not a constant animal. The law often depends on the administrative and executive authorities and the manner in which they interpret and use it. It then depends on the strength and the interpretation of judges which interpret it. And it's the mix of these three that make a law and what happens to it. And I have no doubt that we are on a very, very, very severe downslide on matters. There is little doubt in my mind that the government pays lip service, pure lip service to law and constitutionality. And is the Marquis of Queensberry's rules got over 5 years ago, though most of us haven't realized it. So the government will, in my view, do everything it can to impose its will and to bring people who they think do not share their viewpoints to heel. Now, what has been the use of the penal code, the use of UAPA on the press? The outcomes are rather mixed. And I'll tell you, my personal view is that your recourse, your judicial recourse in such situations often depends which part of the Supreme Court you finally end up before. It might not be legally proper to say this, but it's factually true. You take a simple situation. The Chief Justice in the Arnab Goswami case, paeans of praise about how important it is to have a free media to stop it from being oppressed. The same thing referred once again in the Zubair and the Alt News case. Then you add it up with Kapan's case. Kapan spent 2 years and 4 months in jail because he went before a different part of the court. So I don't really think there's going to be any degree of constancy of judicial protection. This is more like a rearguard action. It's often spasmodic, and it depends to a large extent which part or which court you end up before. And things are bleak. I would add one more word to this. I feel that a declared emergency is often less dangerous than an insidious, creeping erosion and destruction of rights. And that is what we are seeing. I think we must not, I know I don't like to mince my words, and therefore I'm saying this is happening under our nose. When we smell what's happening and we wake up, we'll probably realize it might be too late to do much about it. The journalist fraternity plays an extremely difficult but a very brave role. It's difficult to speak truth to power if power has no constraints itself and power has no equity to it. But the option to not fighting is to roll over and let them do what they want, in which case the fight is always worth it. That's all I can say.
Right, as journalists around the world have been observing, so democracy dies by 1,000 cuts. Sanjay Pandey, you are among the few people who have literally seen both sides of this equation. What was it like to have your devices seized, and how did the information they found?
Well, honestly, anybody seizing something that you've been, as is what's being mentioned, you have so many private things in there which get shared and taken over. It's not a good feeling at all. That's a simple answer. But look, let's look at the law. They have full powers. If you say 90 journalists, they could have gone to 100 journalists, 200 journalists. The law is very, very clear. Anybody that they believe or the police believes has some connection to any of the offense that they're investigating, they can reach out to you. And they can search and seize without a warrant. In cognizable cases, they can do that. I'm coming to the fact that while you have a forum like this, there are certain exceptions of certain things in the CRPC. The Criminal Procedure Code says that the third-party complaints cannot lie under certain sections. So certain sections, like in, say, cheating, you cannot have a third person coming and complaining. I mean, though it is happening now that there are third parties also, but the courts are going in the favor of the complainant where there is a third party in cheating. So the point I'm coming to is that when you come to search and seizures, when we are evolving today, and for all of you, you know, the CRPC is being modified. There is going to be a new penal code. That's what's happening. So why is it that we should not talk about delisting certain things and saying if these things are going to be seized, they are equivalent to, say, your bank accounts, which are under some protection. So I think some protections need to be built in, certainly. And one more thing which I need to say since that came to my mind while I was talking, while you were just mentioning, Aspi. You see, when you are looking at the law and you are looking at the judges and you are looking for some kind of safety and some kind of return, these custodies and other things. But these laws have been made and these laws are there and they are affecting us, they are affecting everybody. People are scared to talk or people are scared to write. We thought that we were the fourth pillar. I'm talking on behalf of the press today. So while they are snatching away your goods, if we say that the media is the fourth pillar, all the other three pillars, I do not want to go in detail, they have serious privileges. You cannot just go and do anything and everything to them. So maybe, as a thought, that this fourth pillar needs a protection. And protection not in terms of somebody being good to you, somebody being cajoling you, but I think a statutory protection is something which is required. I mean, how it will happen, I think the Press Council Act is 78. It's of ages old. There are people who are with the judiciary as well. See how the judges have protected themselves. Judges had that 1850 Act, which was Judicial Officers Act, which did not have the proper provisions. They protected themselves. And they made something in 1885. I was myself actually in one of the cases very aggrieved and I wanted to take it on the particular judge. Could not. The Judicial Judges Protection Act is there. So why today this fourth pillar, the other three you understand, cannot have a statutory protection, and then all these snatching away and other things probably will be much better taken care of. Yeah, that's the point.
That's a very interesting idea, Sanjay. Jitendra, not only sort of protections not being strengthened, there's actually under attack, and you wanted to talk about
exactly
the broadcast bill.
Sanjay ji was talking about protection and privileges for the fourth pillar. But what is happening now, uska ulta hi ho raha hai. Now the government is coming up with broadcast regulation bill. And it is expected कि अगले साल तक जो है ये कानून बन जाएगा. And as per the provision, मैं पढ़कर बताता हूँ, anybody who broadcasts news and current affairs program online as a systematic business, professional or commercial activity, they will come under the ambit of this law. तो अब ये क्यों हो रहा है? ये आपके नाक में और नकेल कसने के लिए हो रहा है. बेसिकली टीवी चैनलों पर आपने दबिश डाल दी. अब टीवी चैनल पर ऐसा कोई कंटेंट, कोई ऐसा टीवी चैनल नहीं है, ना तो इंग्लिश में ना तो हिंदी में, जो सरकार से सवाल पूछता हो या ऐसी खबरें दिखाता हो, ऐसी स्टोरीज करता हो जिससे सरकार अनकंफर्टेबल महसूस करती हो. और टीवी के तमाम पत्रकार आज यूट्यूबर्स बन चुके हैं, इंडिपेंडेंट जर्नलिस्ट हो गए हैं, डिजिटल माध्यम से अपनी बातें कह रहे हैं, अपनी स्टोरीज दिखा रहे हैं. अब उन पर भी नकेल कसी जा रही है इस कानून के जरिए. कानून का मकसद यह है कि जो ऑनलाइन स्ट्रीमिंग प्लेटफॉर्म्स हैं, नेटफ्लिक्स, अमेजॉन प्राइम या फिर डिज्नी हॉटस्टार, उनके कंटेंट को रेगुलेट किया जाए. लेकिन उसके साथ साथ में उसी बहाने जो न्यूज़ कंटेंट है या जो लोग इंडिपेंडेंटली काम करके अपनी आजीविका अर्जित कर रहे हैं, ऐसे लोगों के भी नाक में नकेल डाली जा रही है इस कानून के जरिए। दूसरी बात मेरी अस्पी जी से, आई हैव अ क्वेश्चन। जब विनोद दुआ का केस हुआ था, इन दैट केस देयर वाज अ प्ली दैट ए हाई लेवल कमिटी शुड बी फॉर्म्ड to screen FIRs against journalists. If that committee clears, then FIR could be proceeded with. लेकिन कोर्ट ने ये कहा कि that will like encroaching upon the legislative authority. क्या आपको लगता है कि उसको कोर्ट्स को रिकंसीडर करना चाहिए, और वाकई में क्या लेजिस्लेटिव अथॉरिटी को एंक्रोच होता है ये?
I don't think you're going to get any joy waiting for any legislature in India except in very limited state subjects and opposition rules to help you preserve your liberties. So I don't think that's going to happen. It's wishful thinking. But I must say that on the question of protection of electronic devices, there has been a lot of movement in the Supreme Court. Well, up till now, more noise and fury than progress. But from 2022, the Supreme Court is trying to lay down safeguards over there. There are existing safeguards which are always neglected, like hashtag values, copies, all that, which they don't give. But the problem is, in India, we've always had a very peculiar doctrine. We don't say that illegally obtained evidence is excluded. In India, evidence, howsoever obtained, is admissible. And that leads to a consequence that even if they do an illegal search or seizure, what really happens? But there are two matters pending in the Supreme Court now. One by this letter in November of a number of media groups. But earlier, Mr. Ramaswamy's case in 2022, in which Justice Sanjay Kaul and the Chief Justice of India have issued notice and have been quite clear that you can't allow this system to do it, because if rampant seizing of electronic devices takes place, it affects two things: confidentiality of sources and also the ability to function as a journalist. But the wheels grind very slowly. 22 this has started. We're in 23, we're still waiting for the government to come out with guidelines. I don't really think there's much future in it, but that's the last little ray of hope we've got.
Kalpana Sharma, let's end with you. What do you think we as journalists should do and journalist organizations can do to push back in this situation?
Well, I mean, I'm not in the position to give advice to others, but I would say, for myself, it's very clear to me that as a journalist, I have been trained to report and to write about the things that are not obviously reported. In a country like this, with the kind of power hierarchy we have, the powerful always get their voices heard, irrespective of what the status of freedom of the press is. It's the voiceless, literally, who do not. And the emergency was actually one very clear example of that we could not report about forced sterilization, about the demolition of slums, and all the things that affected poor people. And my own feeling, and I think many people feel, that the reaction against Mrs. Gandhi was strong because of the fact that these were the people who were not only suppressed, but they just were not heard. And they knew that they could use their vote at that point. I think it's very important for us to find ways to continue to reach out to the parts of India that get invisibilized, to people who get invisibilized. That is what we must continue to do, even as we unearth and investigate all the things that are wrong, that are going on, that we ought to be reporting. It's very difficult. Many of us are independent journalists who have earlier worked in mainstream, to find the spaces now in mainstream media for this. So even if you want to do it, to get it actually published and read is a big challenge. I'm talking in print. But I just feel, people have been through worse times, and we should not give up. We want to believe that there is a role for the press, there is a role for journalists who believe in what true journalism is, and we have to just persist. And I think journalism bodies and groups like the Mumbai Press Club and other organizations are the ones that have to give that kind of supportive, play the supportive role, because I think the formal organizations or the law we cannot count on. So I think that those are the things that have to stand by the individual journalists who are taking a stand, who are speaking up. I think it is incumbent on groups like that to support in whatever way they can.
Thanks, Kalpana. I wish we could end on a more optimistic note, but I think we need to be realistic. I'd like to read out a quote that I read in an interview with Maria Ressa, the journalist from the Philippines, who won the Nobel Prize in 2021, who speaks about how journalists need to hold the line, exactly what you were talking about. And she said, we have to accept that in this time period, journalism will be thankless. We will be vilified. Everyone will attack us. But we must keep doing what we're doing because no one else is doing it. And she went on to explain why we need to keep doing what we do. She said, you have to hold the line. The quality of our democracy is as good as the quality of the journalist. If questions aren't asked, then power gets away with what it wants. Thank you to this panel. Thanks, Kalpana, Aspi, Jitendra, Sanjay.